Hey everybody, welcome to Vology's Wireside Chats. I'm your host, Neil Terracciano. I'm here today with several guests to talk about the topic VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. A couple things we want to touch on real fast before we get started here. VDI is a somewhat newer acronym for Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. So when you hear us say VDI, we're referring to Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. And of course, on the other side of that, the current model that most of us are using, we consider the distributed computing model, right? So just to get some terms correct, so as we refer to one or the other, that we're all on the same page. So I want to get this started off. We have three guests with us. We don't have as much time as we'd love to have, but we do have some great guests with us, of course, from any of the major players that are in this, Citrix, VMware, and of course my friend from HP, who handles a lot of the PPS stuff for HP. So if I may, we'll move on to our first guest, Michael Klebe. Right, Michael? Did I get your name right?
You did.
So Michael, can you tell us what it is that you do over at Citrix?
Yeah, so I'm a virtualization systems engineer here at Citrix, and so I'm a kind of the primary technical resource for any customers that we're actually going to be discussing our products with. I work out of the South Florida office, and I'm ready to kind of answer questions and help out where I can.
Awesome. So hopefully you're ready now. We're going to get a few for you. Sounds like you might know a little bit about VDI. So let's start off with that. Michael, I mean, what's VDI? Could you kind of give us the quick, 60-second rundown?
Yeah, so VDI, at least as far as Citrix is concerned, is really the way to just deliver resources out to your users or even to yourselves, right? So if you have applications or an actual desktop like Windows 7 or Windows 8 that you actually need to deliver remotely to your users, we can actually help handle that. And we can support a lot of different use cases across the board that we're going to touch on later today, but it's really just the core concept of delivering resources out to your users.
Okay, so it's a little more specific, right? I mean, the resources that we deliver is a very interesting way that VDI delivers those resources, and it is the differentiation between distributed computing, which is the workstation, and VDI that presents a lot of value. But how did we get there? I mean, VDI is a new name, but not a new concept. So maybe you could kind of give us a little bit of insight on how we got from even the mainframe concept to distributed computing and back to VDI.
Right. So with the mainframe concept that was kind of prevalent in the 80s and kind of the early 90s, these were very heavy type architectures that really needed kind of a dedicated team just to maintain those guys. And if you wanted to actually access anything from a mainframe, you had to go to a terminal and be physically present to go access those applications. And so it became kind of this really heavy way to deliver applications. So in the late 80s, early 90s, the founder of Citrix had this idea of what if we can just kind of host applications for users, and so they can actually access those same applications whether they're at that physical terminal from that mainframe or they're maybe even at home or at a home office or remote or branch office. And so Citrix's kind of core foundation has always been virtualizing applications and delivering them and kind of separating applications from that mainframe terminal way of thinking. VDI came about as a really interesting way to kind of deliver desktops out to end users as well, and it's been kind of furthered by technology advancements as we've kind of progressed in technology since the 90s, but that's really kind of the next concept, right? There are a lot of extra business challenges involved to kind of need or business motives to kind of virtualize an actual desktop, and so that's really where we've kind of come from the application world, and now we're actually providing the full desktop experience from Windows 7 or 8.
It's been an interesting progression, right? I mean, back in the days when I ran an IT department for a small mortgage company, VDI wasn't called VDI. This was closer to the turn of the century, and back then it was Citrix MetaFrame, and we used it more for our remote users until we figured out a way to save a lot of money, and hopefully we'll get a chance to go over those notes a little later on how one saves money with this. But it's progressed from a solution for remote connectivity, right? Because the problem that it was solving was I need to work from home today, but I need access to my applications. And now we're starting to see it permeate into the production environment, right? And that's where we've seen things sort of flourish for VDI, and that's what really got its name, right? I mean, so that takes me to the next piece on the stated value, right? There's several out there. I don't think there's anybody in the world in the VAR universe, or of course from the Citrix and VMware side, that says that, if things are lined up right, VDI can be a real winner for you. So let's move over to our friend from VMware. I have with us Dan Nicolaisen from VMware. Dan, I hope I got your last name right. Was that right?
You did, yeah, you got it. Great job.
Good. So Dan, what do you do for VMware?
So I'm a pre-sales engineer. I do focus on our end user computing products. So VDI obviously is a huge part of that conversation. And yeah, I'm a pre-sales support guy. I help plan infrastructure, go over licensing, all of that good stuff with end users and partners.
Cool. So a little bit between technical and probably from the solution sales side of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Some of the stated values of VDI. Just give us some short bullets. What are some of the values that we get out of VDI?
I think, in my opinion, I think the biggest value really is ease of management when it comes to managing hundreds or even thousands of endpoints. You're able to do all of that from a central location. It's extremely easy to manage, and you're managing it all from one interface. Another one of the big values is just really cost savings, being able to invest in technologies like thinner zero clients instead of purchasing these bulky, expensive, full-blown laptops or desktops. It saves a lot of money just in upfront cost, but then also what it is to maintain. And then I think one of the other values that people don't hit on enough is really the fact that it's much more secure to run VDI versus a traditional approach, where in the case of VDI, there's not really any data or information that's residing on the endpoint itself. It's all secured into the data center. So, yeah.
Hey, that's another strong one, right? So what I'm hearing is easy to manage, maybe a reduced total cost of ownership for those of us that want to have the foresight of the value of our investment over the next several years, because there's still a CapEx problem. And we'll talk about some of that too when we have a moment. And then, of course, the security issue, which unfortunately, in a lot of SMB enterprise, security only becomes a concern after we've been burnt once. So if anybody's ever lost laptops or lost workstations or had that walkout security problem, there's some value that I'm hearing from you on that piece. So, let me direct this one back to our friend from Citrix, Michael. What are some of the barriers to getting started in VDI that you've come across? Because obviously, if you're out there trying to evangelize virtual desktop infrastructure to customers, you've gotten some no's. What are the barriers?
So a lot of the barriers that people come into the VDI world with really kind of do hinge on the kind of the cost perspective. It can be, or it can seem like it's a very costly thing to deliver a single virtual desktop, a single version of Windows 7 out to a user when you have hundreds or thousands of users out there. And so one of the ways that we kind of see at Citrix the kind of to get across that barrier is we have a number of different solutions that can actually lower the amount of true virtual desktops you need. So we can actually share resources and share desktops amongst users instead of going one-to-one with everything. But the other kind of perceived barrier is really that ease of management that we were talking earlier. How do I go about managing physical workstations where I'm used to just putting like a disk in and having a new operating system spin up, or using an ISO from a file share, to actually managing everything just from a data center perspective?
So CapEx, right? That's another big one, because we're going to progress into some of the technologies that are associated with VDI, and capital expenditure is, from my experience, I've not only implemented virtual desktop infrastructure, but I've also had a lot of opportunities, especially because I work here at Vology, and Vology is one of the biggest authorities on virtualization, especially on desktop virtualization. So there's a lot of people that say no because we get this sticker shock from the initial investment that's associated with it. And I think that takes us to the piece where these barriers, they need some kind of compelling reason to be overcome. If we're facing some kind of infrastructure refresh, it may be time to look at VDI. There's a couple of technologies out there that have made VDI much better solution, much more probable for you to evaluate. The advent of shared storage, which shared storage from a NAS perspective has kind of been around for 10 or 15 years, but the price has become more affordable to get to the performance level you need to serve out literally thousands of desktops. So with that, and plus the advent of server virtualization, we've been able to maximize the utilization of the servers and spin up more purpose out of each given server and drive down what we might need to invest from a CapEx perspective. So the compelling events, which are things like workstation refresh, which we're going to touch on that a little bit when you get an opportunity to talk about some of the HP technologies that are there. And then, of course, more affordable SAN solutions, whether it's software-defined storage or some other way. The idea is to make sure that we have conversations early on with the customer or the end user to kind of understand where the priorities are. Sometimes it's security, sometimes it's CapEx, Sometimes it's TCO. But I can tell you this, and I think everybody would agree in the group here, that if you are not willing to talk about or think about the cost of your infrastructure for the next 3 to 5 years, then you're not going to select VDI. VDI gets its win when you think about how much you're going to get back from your investment. So speaking of that, let's go to one of the parts of the puzzle that I like the most, right? Which is we get to geek out on a little bit of gear that we get to use with this stuff. You know, we're going to have different segments that go over SAN and servers and VDI environment. But right now, you know, let's talk about some of the hardware. So I have with me my very, very close friend Brian Waters from HP Printing and Personal Systems, right?
That's
from
correct,
HP.
in that category. Yes.
So what do you do for HP?
I'm a specialist in just thin clients, so that's what I focus on, and I've been doing it 7 years, so I've seen a lot of changes in those 7 years pertaining to thin clients.
Okay, so no printers?
I'm involved with printers, but no, I don't focus on that. But anything that's
Okay.
attached to the thin client, sure, that gets in. That's all part of the
But your main focus is really just
thin
going to
clients.
be
Yes.
thin clients and zero clients.
Correct,
So,
and zero clients, absolutely.
so let's walk through a scenario, right?
Okay.
I think maybe one of the ways, especially for the audience that might be watching us today, possibly facing a workstation refresh, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we have 1,000 users on our network that are all using, you know, workstations, probably from various releases of the workstation, but all of them are coming close to their end of life. And so this is one of those compelling events, folks, that becomes sort of important to evaluate VDI in that case. There's two ways you can go. In my experience from VDI, I extended the life of my workstations. The workstations, the performance was going downhill from the sense of the applications that were being written were demanding more and more. And so my workstations were starting to approach the 5- and 6-year-old mark. Now they were not only becoming less and less reliable, but the performance wasn't there. So we converted those workstations into thin clients. I still dealt with changing out hardware.
Right.
So thin clients are something I wish I had at that time because I spent way more than the cost of a thin client in soft dollar expenses.
Right.
So workstation nowadays, if I've got 1,000 users, my workstations can cost me somewhere around $1,000 for the mid to low end, right?
Correct.
If it's an HP workstation,
Right.
upwards of $2,000 for a power user, or even more sometimes. But a thin client, where can I land on the price point for that?
Well, from a zero client, $200 up into a high end that can do 3D imaging, $500, a little bit higher than that, maybe $600 is kind of the highest end of that.
Okay. So serious savings, right?
Serious savings, and you have double the life cycle of a desktop or workstation. You've got double the life cycle. So you're able to get, you know, the benefit of that too. So there's savings there too. Energy efficiency savings there.
So the life cycle is double. So
Yes.
my workstation might last on average 4 years. A thin client might go as far as 8 or
Yeah,
more.
and we see 10 years out there. We do. It's not
Wow.
uncommon to see 10 years.
And why do you think that is? Is it because of the components that are in it, or?
It's the design of it. If we look at we can look at it later, but it's the solid state nature of it. It's designed.
There's no moving parts.
No moving parts, and the benefit of that, it's minus a hard drive, and that's where you see a lot of failure happening is the hard drive level. So for many reasons, there's all kinds of different reasons why that can fail. But it can handle harsh environments, so it can handle high temperatures, low temperatures. So it's great for a manufacturing vertical market, you know, for that kind of business. And it's secure, so it's great for banking. It's great for attorneys. It's the application now for a thin client. It's no longer the dumb terminal, as you know. You can do so much with it. It's sophisticated today, I believe.
So, you know, sophisticated, though, is something usually we get pushback on. I have a bunch of, out of my 1,000 users, let's say I have 100 CAD, you know, 100 people doing CAD.
Right.
I mean, is the thin client going to help us out there? I mean,
we can do CAD with our West 7 and our West 8 thin clients that are embedded. Yes, we have a dedicated graphics card in those particular thin clients. So you're able to do CAD.
So there's GPU in some of these guys.
Correct.
So we can pin it off. Because I know there's another option too, right? Let me reel the Citrix and VMware guys back into this. Let's start off with VMware. Dan, you guys are utilizing some technologies. Maybe you can give us a quick, like 20 seconds. Are there some enhancements on the GPU side that could help, say, the power user or the CAD user from VMware's perspective?
Yes, absolutely, and we do have some offerings that are available, whether you're taking a shared or a dedicated approach to how we are actually computing on the graphics side of things. You can install a physical GPU in your servers, and you can actually pass through or offload that portion of the processing onto those graphics cards. And so the shared approach, obviously you have multiple users sharing one GPU. Our dedicated approach is you're lining up a GPU with the user, and that obviously gets a lot better performance and really is getting close nowadays to near native performance as you would have if it was on the endpoint itself. So we do have
I've seen it. It's actually pretty impressive. Yeah. So let me go over to Citrix and give you guys an opportunity to tell us about. I think HDX is really sort of centered around the idea that now there is. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, there is some options for GPU pass-through as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so just right out of the box, when you first install Zen Desktop or any kind of Citrix product in general from this virtualization side, there's an extreme amount of flexibility to kind of customize how visuals are displayed back to an end user. But if you need those high-powered kind of AutoCAD users, or you need to do 3D modeling or software or heavy-duty software rendering, we can certainly take advantage of all the kind of latest GPU technologies out there. And we're kind of on the cutting edge or bleeding edge. We're working with partners like NVIDIA to really bring some of their more advanced technology into the server fold as well. So if you have those virtualized server GPUs, we can also take advantage of them and give users a nice kind of seamless dedicated GPU experience.
That's that new K2 card, right? Is that the one you're talking about?
Absolutely. So we worked very closely with NVIDIA to develop kind of custom support.
So for our lay audience, we're able to actually move the processing power. There's two processors now really that exist in our machines. The one is that does the heavy computing. That's the one that most of us lay audience knows what that is. But there's also a graphics processor that's usually in a machine. And a lot of times by going to VDI, it presented challenges with the graphics processor. So what we're seeing now is the evolution in getting that graphics processor on the thin client so that we can use some of the horsepower there, and or going to a row of PCI cards essentially that are in your server that we're able to provision graphical power to the desktop solution.
And if I could add something too, HP also has what's called Velocity, HP Velocity. Are you familiar much with that?
Mm-hmm.
Velocity actually helps in the VDI session. It also works with the audio and video production. It's a proactive, so before it's streaming down there, it just helps enhance the prevents latency, and that's kind of what HP adds to the table from that.
So just more performance, right? So graphics, I think we've eliminated that one as a concern, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because some of the stuff, and I know I kind of got off on a tangent here. So I know that we have a couple products here. One's a thin client, one's a zero client. So maybe you can clear the air on that one for us.
Sure.
Differentiate a zero client from a thin client for me.
I guess the best way to look at that is a zero client does not have an operating system. So it's relying completely on the data center. So generally, everything has to be pushed out from the data center in order to use a zero client.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean you might have issues with peripherals, where a dedicated standard thin client has more ability to have the drivers for those kind of things.
Okay, so, and this is the zero client, right? If I've got this correct, is this a zero client?
That's a PC over. That's a sophisticated zero client. That's a VMware focused PC over IP one.
Okay.
The most zero clients aren't as they're I guess they're different setup than the standard thin client. So
sure. I know we want to get too technical, but this one under here is your standard thin client.
This one has a dedicated graphics card.
Okay.
And so that can do
a little more graphics.
True depth. Oh, a lot more graphics. Correct.
That's great.
Yeah,
okay. So zero clients, just to kind of sum it up, they're a lot cheaper though, right? Because
they are
there's
cheaper.
Even less involved in manufacturing the zero client.
And this is the big thing we run into. A lot of times people will like the zero client based on price. A zero client.
Because this is the one that's under $300.
It's $200, correct.
Okay.
But that's they don't realize that they have to really ramp up the data center to support a zero client. If everyone's networked and if printers are networked and from that perspective, zero client can make sense. If everyone's kind of doing the same task load, the same workload, that makes sense.
So it's not the answer for everybody.
No, but what's great about the zero client is it's user-friendly with the other thin clients, so you can have a mixed environment. So for different departments that don't really need the requirement for, they're not power users. They don't really need to have the full-blown thin client. So for offsetting costs, as we were talking about earlier, you can do that with a mixed environment.
So this one is kind of neat.
Yeah, it's a great one.
So folks, this looks like a, you have to excuse all the noise I'm sure the mic is making for you guys. But this one is actually not, this looks like an expensive laptop, but it's not. This is a thin client, right?
Yes, it is. It is a West.
So there's a very small flash RAM on here that holds a very small sort of system that can help us connect to our servers, right? That'll deliver the desktop to this machine.
Correct.
So I can use this in public places like
Absolutely.
Panera Bread.
Yes.
So what is the cost of this, right? Because I know I just bought a laptop. It was $2,400, an
Okay.
HP laptop. As far as the quality of the box goes, right, it's very similar to this. What does this guy
It's
run?
the same kind of design, $600.
So this is $600.
Yeah.
Okay, so you might be able to find a laptop for $600 at Best Buy,
Mhm.
but it's not a commercial grade laptop.
Right.
This is commercial grade, and it's $600. It's going to last us a lot longer. Does this have the same expected life
It does.
as your typical? So,
It does.
so folks, you're looking at a laptop that supposedly can make it 7, 8, 9, 10 years
Mhm.
for a lot of uses because it doesn't have moving parts, right? It doesn't have stuff that can
one
write.
thing it does have, we've included a 16 gig flash drive on there. So the flash, the purpose of that is for local app requirements. So, you're able to do things in the flash in order to keep this thing current for years to come. So, but the advantage is just like we were talking about earlier, is the security you have from this. If you were to leave it in a cab or it gets taken or stolen.
Yeah, let's center on that a little
Yeah.
bit. So some of the advantages with thin clients that we didn't, we talked about security a little bit, but
Right.
Laptops are a major security concern.
Exactly, it is.
So if I'm a Panera Bread and I just I'm out to lunch and I left it behind, there's a couple problems, right? Number one is it cost me $2,400. Well, cost Vology $2,400 for the laptop, so someone's going to take it out on me. And then the second piece is there's a lot of proprietary information on the normal laptop. So that's really eliminated now, right? I mean, you're beating both of those because it's $600.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I didn't lose as much money, right? I lost almost $1,800, somewhere around there.
What's interesting is rarely do you find a company where the data that's on local desks, in that case, if somebody had a local laptop, rarely do you find it not being of a concern. I mean, name a company that it's not a concern.
Well, no, I have a bunch of customer.
Yeah,
I have
it's
a
a
ton of
concern to
customer
everybody,
information.
really.
My customers probably would appreciate it if their information wasn't available to the thief that stole the laptop, right?
Right.
So that doesn't happen with this.
It does not.
It's what we call walk-away security, folks, where someone can just take that desktop, workstation, or that laptop and walk away. So that's really great. You had another point?
One quick point is as far as if a person downtime. You ship out another thin client, they're up in minutes. They just get their VPN
That's a great
connection.
point.
And then otherwise, you don't have to load software. You don't have to do all that. And they're relatively virus-proof, so you don't really have to worry about, because where does the virus go? There's no place for it to go. The flash,
No, it's on the servers all under, these are all good points. Folks, we could talk about this
all day
forever, right? So one other thing I do want to talk about real quick before I sum this up is that we didn't touch on was another thing that a lot of us, especially in the IT world, we own our power bill now. This is a game changer for that, right? Because
Absolutely.
I know a workstation might pull somewhere around 400 watts.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are pulling a lot less, right? What kind of wattage are these? Just give me a range.
12, 30, 40, I mean, just really low, really
so
low.
We're at less than 10% generally.
Absolutely.
So we're about a 90% power savings. So think about the 1,000 workstations that cost $2 million to purchase versus maybe you're not let's just assume you're a zero client customer. This is $200 instead of $2,000. So you just knocked off a pretty big zero, right?
Well, and one thing too, I'm sorry to mean it, but one thing too is we've seen a lot of times IT staff is kind of going down a little bit. There's not as many people in the
So the management costs are...
Management costs, I mean, you can have one person doing what multiple people had to do before with our management tool and being able to be remote locations, which is another key factor for a thin client. Remote offices, people and working from home, and you're able to manage that all instead of locally managing them, having to troubleshoot locally. You're doing a bigger, broader picture remotely. So it's a huge advantage.
That's great. So folks, what I'm hearing, we're going to wrap this up. Typically, we like to give our audience a little time for questions. I apologize for that. We'll be sure that we do cover those on the next episode, which will be a little more technical and in depth. We could have honestly spent 2 hours on this, but let's just run it down. Run through this really quick. VDI is expensive to implement. If you can get past the CapEx and start looking at whether you're investing in savings for down the road, it could very well be a big winner for you for many reasons that you have to pull these into your ROI calculations, right? Power is one of them. We're talking about a serious savings in power for this, say, a 500 workstation or 1,000 workstations. We're talking about a 90% decrease in the power that those workstations pull. Maybe it's time to look at that, how much you're paying in power to power up all your workstations. That one alone can many times justify the investment and give you an ROI. Management is another one. The general rule of thumb, nowadays it's a little tougher, but general rule of thumb is somewhere between 100 and 200 users per service desk professional. With VDI, the numbers, I mean, I can't even tell you. Sometimes you can get to 500 or 1,000 users because it's so much easier to manage the users. Everything's drag and drop from one server location. So think about a lot of the cost savings that we can have where if you continue to grow, maybe you don't need to continue to bring on IT folks to support all of that. And the management costs go down considerably. So from power and management costs, that's one thing. Security is another one where it's almost immeasurable. We can monetize a lost laptop, but how much is the data worth? There's a lot of folks that are able to crack these things and get into encrypted drives and get the information off of there. There's a lot of us that have bad passwords. Encryption is no good with a bad password. Someone can get in there and steal the information. You need to be willing to investigate those parts, those values for VDI to be of value to you. If you're strapped for cash, you can't make the expense and CapEx. Maybe VDI is not the timing right. Still talk to us. Still talk to your Vology trusted advisor. Maybe we can put you on a path that will get you there in the end. So guys, I wish I could have given you more time, both VMware and Citrix. I really appreciate all the time that you guys had given us on this. I know it's been us a little time to get some thoughts together on this. Promise you we'll get you guys back. Audience, I promise we're going to get everyone back. We'll get a little more technical. Listen, if you're not technical, find someone that is from your organization. Get them on the next Hangout where we'll take a deeper dive on VDI on the more technical aspect. So please do not fear reaching out to your Vology professional to talk about VDI, to see if it's an option now, maybe in the future. Let's get a roadmap put together. Be sure to follow us on all the social media with Twitter. You can also do this again on YouTube and reach out to any of the folks that were on this call. You can get all the information you need on our website. Until then, folks, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you on the wire side.